It was 1993, June month, and the day was 10th, the 10th of June, 1993. It was the first official date that Becky and I had together. And I say official date because it was quarantined and guaranteed and confirmed that this was what took place. And I wanted to take her somewhere very, very special. Connoisseur of food. I really liked the idea of somewhere really unique. And a food experience that was just not only a gastronomical memory, but also a romantic moment as well. So we went to Pizza Hut. We ordered a single pizza with black olives and mushrooms. No. I discovered that I do not like mushrooms, or I should say Becky discovered that I do not like mushrooms. And I discovered from her that she did not like olives. So it was a great start. Years later, 30 years later, when Becky lost her ability to write, which was her art, and her ability to really see a lot, she started to record on her iPhone lots and lots of voice memos. Sometimes she would send it to friends. This is the way that she communicated with her friends and community, you as well. And she would send these voice memos. And I have 88 of these, and I've listened to all of them. And in fact, this morning, a friend of hers sent me one of the voice memos, so I now have 89 of what Becky had sent to her as well. And so it was a beautiful reminder. In one of those series, she actually recorded a 3-part mini-series for me. It was about how we met and the infamous June 10 date. Now you say infamous. Why infamous? Because of the mushrooms and olives? No, because I had deposited in my bank some money, some funds, and they had not cleared by the time the bill. So it ended up becoming a rather expensive experience. And she laughed about this, and she said, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe how expensive that first date was." I said, I know. Believe me, I remember. And but that's why we called it the infamous date. So we have, for many years, celebrated June 10. We loved it. It was fantastic. And in that recording, she reminded me that was really, really good. So 2 years ago, in 2021, in June, I was driving to Sacramento Airport in California to pick Becky up from the airport, where we were going to go to San Francisco for the weekend. It's June, and we're going to celebrate. I love San Francisco. Becky loves San Francisco. I enjoyed the food there. She enjoyed walking there. And that was a great relationship, the way it worked. She would walk the entire city. I would sit at the bridge. She would cross it back and forth. I would read, and then we'd go get coffee. It was amazing. So this is what we're planning, San Francisco. It's going to be a great weekend. About 15 minutes before I arrived at Sacramento Airport, I got a text from my brother. And he lives in Estonia. And this arrived on June 4, 2021 at 12:15 p.m. Ambulance at Mom and Dad's place. Dad fell over in the shower, and he's having difficulty breathing. I knew it was Friday, and I knew that at that time, it's close to 6 in England, and my dad was absolutely going to take a shower. He had polished his shoes. He prepared for Sabbath. This was his ritual of Sabbath entrance for him. So my brother went on and said, Mom called him, to ask us to pray for him. Hey, it doesn't sound good. His face is blue. I pulled over on I-80, and I just stopped on the side of the road. I actually know the spot because I drive past it nearly every week now. I listened to my brother, what he was saying, and I realized my brother was now on the phone with my mom, and my mom was in a room while my dad was in the shower. She could not face what was happening with him. I sent a text to Becky. I said to her, "You're going to land in about 15 minutes, and I'm not going to be there. But when you do, call me, and I'll explain what's going on." So eventually, Becky was at the airport in the waiting area. She called me, and she's on the phone, and I'm on the text with my brother. At 1:05 p.m., my brother says, he's still on the floor in the same position. And I wrote back, "Oh my. I think they're administering oxygen through pumping manually. I hear constant pumping sounds in the background." So I asked him, "Is there some kind of monitor cuff?" He said, I think they're administering more adrenaline. And then he said, he's dead. So I said, well, let me know when I can call, because I know you're on the phone with my mom now, with our mom. It was 1 hour and 4 minutes from the very first text until my father was gone. And that was June 4, 2021. 2 years later, on June 2 this year, 2023, my mother passed away from her battle of a 6-month battle that she had with pancreatic cancer. And then 19 days later, on June 21, Becky passed away as well from her 18-month journey with glioblastoma, a terminal form of brain cancer. So June is a very different month for me now. It is, in many ways, the combination of the start of summer and the beginning of winter combined together. It is that spot in the middle of the equator that I experience right now. June is entirely different. But June has now provided me the space to be transparent with you about things that I could not share when my parents were alive. Some of you may know some of this because of the private conversations we've had, but I will share a little bit with you. I dearly loved my parents, and they were both incredibly intelligent people. My father spoke 5 languages. He could read Hebrew and Greek fluently, and in the latter years of his life, he retranslated the entire Bible, correcting wherever the term spirit appeared in a way that was not appropriate and misunderstood. But he did the entire Bible. I mean, just loved that kind of stuff. A bright, bright fellow. My mother was just as intelligent. She spoke 4 languages. She was a great artist, a great chef, amazing. And when we were kids, my brother and I, we grew up a little bit older. She went back to school, and she studied again and got a degree in mathematics. But my parents were deeply, deeply private people, not transparent. Transparency, in fact, was not part of their vocabulary. I had no idea that my father was dying. The last time I saw him, about 6 months before he passed away, I was over there. I remember hugging him. I remember him just smiling strong. He put his cheek on my cheek, which is something that he learned over time, because he was not a very affectionate person, but grew into that space. So I remember the bristles of his very hard beard, the shadow on his beard on my face, and I had no idea. They, in fact, had to do an autopsy on my father to work out that he had died of cancer because he hadn't seen a doctor in so long. We grew up very simple and very poor. I lost count of all the houses that I lived in. I cannot tell you how many cars I worked on, but there's pretty much not a single thing that I can't do on an engine. We went on one vacation only as a family, and that was to go to the Middle East to search for the lost Ark of the Covenant. You laugh, and there will be a sermon on this. It is not today. I remember one house we lived in where we would have to literally clean all the dishes every single time to remove all the mice and the rat droppings from the plates before we ate. And for several years, this is how we washed clothes. We would take a tube, we would attach it to the washing machine, we'd pour water into it, we'd drop all the clothes in and add the soap and let this washing machine just go dum, 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 for hours. And then we would take a pipe and we'd drain this washing machine, put it into buckets, put it into the kitchen sink, and then fill it up with water and let it go again for another hour. And then we drain it again, fill it up with water so you can take all the soap away and go back and forth. And eventually you would take these clothes out and you would wring them over the kitchen sink and then line dry them. I am so excited every time I go to my washing machine. I'm like, oh, you beautiful thing. Here's a Tide Pod. Go. It's amazing. It's amazing. The simple things that we thank God for and are happy for. You would never think that I've gone without a meal. But I may have developed an appetite to store for the winter because of my childhood. My parents always gave the best to everybody else. Whenever we ate, if there was old food, they would eat the old food. And they would give the good stuff to us as kids. But if I wanted to get into a deeper conversation, they really struggled. I knew, in the case of my mother, that she was going to pass. So in March this year, I flew out to visit her. And I really wanted to engage in the reality of what was going on. I've done this with so many people. I know how to do this with people. And I wanted to do this with my mother. And I wanted to talk to her about what she was fearing, what she was feeling, and it was impossible. We had conversations about everything and anything except for reality of what was taking place right in front of our eyes. It was what I would refer to as veneer moments. What I wanted was real wood. I wanted the unvarnished truth. I wanted to hear her thoughts and fears, and I wanted transparency. And I think we all want transparency, right? Yeah? I mean, when the markets are kind of going up or down and interest rates are going up, you want your government to give you some transparency about what's going on. If churches are struggling and the offerings start to go down and pastors get moved and things happen, you want some transparency about what's going on. When marriages fail and kids are distressed and services are called in, we all want transparency. And when you go to the hospital and you come away worse, you want transparency, believe me. So when we speak of authentic Adventism, an Adventism that is healthy, that brings hope, that heals the brokenhearted, we believe, and we have been taught, that it's in part due to transparency. Because surely all transparency is good, right? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if all transparency is good. In fact, I think that we may wander into some delicate places inside there. Look, when you are talking in your community and you divulge things about yourself, you're either sharing facts, or you're sharing a story, or you're sharing a little bit of drama, right? So facts would be like, the Queen died, facts. A story would be, the Queen died, and the king is depressed. That's a story now. And here's the drama. The queen died, and the king is bankrupt. Ooh. So my parents were very, very good at facts. Oh, they love facts. We could exchange facts back and forth by text, by email, on the phone. We could discuss theology, all facts. We could get into a story occasionally, but drama, oh my. Drama we avoided. And I think that we take those three pieces and we push them through transparency in different ways. So there is what I would refer to as kind of like grapevine transparency. We all love it, right? A little bit of gossip. It often starts with the line, "You never guess what I heard." I mean, we like it. We will go on Instagram or Facebook and we will see a picture and we will say, "No, did you see what they posted?" And we take a photo, we send it as a text to somebody else, like, "Get away with that." Grapevine transparency. We're being a little bit honest, but we're enjoying the conversation. It's actually okay. It's okay. Delicate transparency is honestly, if shared, it can cause more damage than good. So we've got grapevine transparency, we've got delicate transparency, which can be good, but it needs to be shared responsibly in a transformative way. And then I believe there is the ultimate, responsible transparency. This is the form that will always call you to some kind of reflection or an action. When you share something that is responsible transparency, you're causing people to think differently, and you're causing them to act differently. I think that we mix them up all the time, and I think that's what causes polarization in the world. But I do believe that John, the Apostle John in the Bible, was very good at all three of these, and he used all three of them in the gospel. So John loved to refer to himself as the one who Jesus loved, right? That's a little bit of grapevine transparency. I mean, when in the end, you don't have that many words left to write in the gospel, but you found time to tell him that. Oh, yeah. When he gets to the tomb, he's like, "And Peter was coming, but I made it here first." It's a little bit of grapevine transparency. Now, there is some depth behind it, and you can study that and work that out, but it's good as well. He was also very good at delicate transparency. The confession and conversation of a high-ranking church official who realizes that his conscience doesn't align with his faith. And that conversation that happened with Nicodemus at nighttime in the dark was recounted by John using absolutely delicate transparency. He's like, look, I need you to understand, difficult things can happen, and it is good. But it changed that man, changed him forever, and he became a follower of Jesus. But one of my favorite stories is about responsible transparency. And John does this, but he actually does this once everyone's gone. Sometimes you can't share the story until they're gone, because you want to honor them, like my parents. I want to honor them, but they would have been horrified to hear me share about the things that they had gone through in their life. John knew how to do this, and so he tells a story found in John chapter 18. And you can go to your Bibles and look at John chapter 18. It's great. It's a phenomenal story, and I'm reading it from the English Standard Version. John 18, starting verse 15. Jesus has been arrested, and Peter wants to know what's going on. So it says there in verse 15, Simon, Peter, followed Jesus, and so did the other disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside the door. Verse 17, the servant girl at the door said to Peter, you also are not one of the men's disciples, are you? And he said, I'm not. Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold. And they were standing and warming themselves. Peter was also with them and standing and warming himself. Then watch this. A few minutes later, you get down to verse 25 in John chapter 18. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. So they said to him, you also not one of the disciples, are you? And he denied it and said, I'm not. Then one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter cut off, so it's like a family member, who was there that night, saw his cousin have his ear chopped off, looked over, saw Peter and said, did I not see you in the garden with him? And Peter again denied it and said, once the rooster crowed. Poor Peter, right? Quite a moment in history, but more importantly in his personal life. Knowing when to use your voice and when to be silent is never easy. Our brother John the Apostle felt this pressure point and did not give up on Peter's story. So he weaves this thread of responsible transparency. And you get to the end of John chapter 21, verse 9, and he begins like this. He says, when they got out on the land, he saw a charcoal fire in place. Transparency is very, very difficult, and it doesn't feel natural to us, and we can't help ourselves. But what I do love about this story is that John knows what Jesus is doing. How Jesus wants to have a deeply personal conversation and be fully transparent with this guy. And so what he does is he builds a charcoal fire and he makes the most amazing fish and chips. He knows that the embers from that fire are going to remind Peter of a moment when he was warming his hands and when he spoke of God last. He knows how to set the place to have a responsible, transparent conversation. It's what we do all the time when we're sitting down over a meal with somebody. It's what we do with those that we know and we love. And then when Peter was ready, he had this conversation. It was transformative. It changed Peter. It restored him. It saved him. And all the followers that followed afterwards, because transparent conversations cause action or reflection. When I first got to know Becky, I really only knew one joke, and it was very funny in the 1970s and in the 1980s, but this was 1993. So I gave it my best. I told her the joke, and it's about a hedgehog and a rabbit, as most English jokes are. And she laughed graciously, very kindly. And then eventually she bought me a stuffed hedgehog, and I bought her a stuffed rabbit. A few months before we were married, we were sitting down and talking, and she looked around and said, "Hey, where's the hedgehog?" And I said, "It's, was there on the bookcase. I know it's stuffed." So it didn't move by itself. So I said, "I don't know, I'll go ask my mom." So I went downstairs to ask my mom where the hedgehog was. She looked at me and she said, "You need to go ask your father." I was like, "Ask my father? Is my father into hedgehogs? Does he have a collection in his office? Is there something secret that I never knew? Will this be a transparent moment?" I go find my dad, and my dad says to me in no uncertain terms that in Brazil, the hedgehog is a symbol of evil and of dark, dark magic. And therefore, he took the hedgehog and burnt it. Huh. Becky, do you want to marry me? We will have to have a cauldron in the yard for various items that you may give me as gifts at various points in our marriage. I know that you're not quite sure what to make of this, so I would suggest that we could talk about this privately over, maybe some charcoal fire and some amazing fish and chips, and we could divulge. I can share a little bit more about this. But let me tell you this: the reason why I share this story is that this story made a difference in my life, and it's worth sharing for you. That there was, in fact, with Becky, nothing I could not share. There was no topic that I could not go to Becky and talk about. She was really good at this. She, I remember, and she was good with this with lots of people, but often we would be lying down in our bed, and my youngest son would walk in. He's taller than me, it's like, "Hey, Dad, how are you?" And he would come in, and he would just lay down like he's a 2-year-old in the middle of us. I'm like, "You're a grown man. What are you doing here?" And I knew what was happening. He was just laying down, and we were like, "Hey, how's it going?" And nothing to really say. I'm like, "Should I leave?" I didn't have to say that. I would just get up, and because he wants to have a conversation with his mom. He wants to have a charcoal fire moment with his mom. And so I would leave, and they would have dialogues, and then later on I'd find out the gossip. But it would only be a little bit. But it was great. I love this, that we could talk about any subject. We could talk about anything between us and everything. And it was very risky, but it was worth it. You were living so much deeper. The church, your church, our church, can only hurt you if you love it. But if you stay veneer with the church, if you only share grapevine transparency, gossip that you've heard, and you never get deep, I fear that you'll be more like my parents. And when something impossible happens and you need someone, you'll be by yourself. My mom and dad both had hardly anybody around them when they died. They had good people, but not as many as they could have. Whereas I and Becky, we had you. We had a global church family that was phenomenal and still is phenomenal. And it's because we risked by sharing, and you in turn risked by sharing back. And through that responsible transparency, the impossible was not done alone. Our family, our faith, our tribe is only as beautiful as we give of ourselves.